When God speaks, his words do not come as mere sounds cast into the air, but as eternal laws that fasten themselves into the very fabric of reality. They are not only commands to be obeyed, they are truths that create the ground beneath our feet, the sky above our heads, and the unseen streams of life that carry us forward. When he says, "This one method can make you a king," he is not speaking of crowns forged of gold, nor thrones adorned with ivory, nor palaces guarded by iron gates, but of a kingship that begins at the level of the soul and unfolds outward until even the visible world must yield to it. And the strange, secret principle by which he crowns men with such greatness is not pride, nor power, nor the loudness of human ambition, but humility. For humility is the hidden root from which greatness rises, the quiet seed that produces a harvest which no empire can rival. In a world where men imagine that the ladder to authority must be climbed by sharp elbows and loud proclamations, God whispers that the one who stoops low will be lifted high, and the one who bows his head in reverence shall wear a crown that cannot be removed. Humility, when spoken of, is often mistaken for weakness, as though it were nothing more than the shuffling of feet or the refusal to look men in the eye. But in truth it is the most solid strength, for it does not depend on the crumbling sands of reputation or applause. Humility begins with the acknowledgement that one is not the source of life, not the fountain of wisdom, not the maker of the stars, but a creature whose very breath is borrowed. The humble man knows he is dust, yet dust beloved of the eternal. He does not deny his gifts, but he does not clutch them as if they were his own invention. He receives them as a child receives bread from the hand of a father, with thanksgiving and with joy. And this posture, this lowliness of heart, is what makes him a king, because it aligns him with the deepest structure of reality. For the universe itself bows to its maker, and only the rebellious heart that refuses humility stands out of tune, like a broken string on a great harp. To embrace humility, then, is to come into harmony with the order of creation, and harmony is always fruitful, always exalted, always lifted above chaos. Consider the lives of those who seemed least likely to ascend yet were lifted by this law. The shepherd boy, tending his flock in silence, singing psalms to the unseen heavens, was taken from the pastures and set upon the throne of Israel. The world saw only a youth untrained in arms, yet heaven saw the humility of one who did not claim strength as his own, but looked to the Lord of hosts. Or think of the prisoner languishing in a foreign dungeon, forgotten by men, accused falsely and condemned without hope. Yet in his humility he did not curse God, but interpreted dreams not for his own glory, but for the sake of truth. And in time, the same man rose to sit at the right hand of Pharaoh, governing a nation and feeding countless lives. These are not tales for children, nor ornaments of history. They are living illustrations of the principle spoken by Goddard that humility crowns greatness, that the bowed head will one day wear a diadem, that the servant will one day be seated among kings. The proud heart, however, strives for crowns with desperate hands. It scrambles, it fights, it deceives, it tramples. And if for a moment it grasps power, that power trembles in its grasp, for it is built upon sand. History is full of such figures. Men who declared themselves mighty, who built monuments to their names, who made the world tremble for a season. But their thrones decayed, their statues crumbled, their empires were swallowed by dust. Pride can build swiftly, but it builds houses of cards. Humility builds slowly, often invisibly, but it builds upon the rock. And when the storms come, the humble man stands secure, not because of his own strength, but because he has yielded to the strength that undergirds all things. Thus God has woven humility into the very law of kingship, making it the one method by which true greatness is bestowed. The path of humility is not glamorous. It asks us to listen when we would rather speak, to serve when we would rather be served, to forgive when we would rather avenge, to admit our ignorance when we would rather pretend to know. It is the daily dying of the self that longs for recognition. Yet paradoxically, this dying is what gives birth to life. When the seed falls into the ground and is buried, when it is hidden from the eyes of men and stripped of all beauty. Then, and only then, does it break forth with green shoots that rise toward the sun. So it is with the soul that chooses humility. What looks like loss is the beginning of gain. What looks like surrender is the secret to dominion. For God has said it, and his word cannot fail. This one method can make you a king. There is a sweetness in humility that no proud heart has ever tasted. The humble man does not live in fear of being unmasked, for he has nothing to pretend. He does not live in dread of losing his throne, for his throne was never built by his own hand. He walks lightly, as though his burdens have been lifted, because they have been laid upon shoulders stronger than his. And in this lightness, he is free to rejoice, free to give, free to bless. And the people around such a man feel a strange safety, for in his presence there is no competition, no hidden rivalry, no grasping for advantage. They sense in him a reflection of that greater king, who came not to be served but to serve, and whose humility shook the foundations of the world. Thus even before the crown is placed upon his head, the humble man reigns in the hearts of others, because he has mastered the hardest kingdom of all, the kingdom of his own pride. Yet humility is not a garment one can simply put on outwardly. If it is worn only for show, it betrays itself at once, for it rings hollow and its seams quickly tear. True humility must grow inwardly, as the fruit of a deep vision of God's greatness. The man who has seen the heavens stretched out like a tent, who has stood by the sea and felt its endless roar, who has watched the birth of a child and known that such wonders are beyond his crafting, cannot help but bend low. He does not need to feign humility, for he has seen reality, and reality has reduced him to awe. From that awe grows gratitude, and from gratitude grows service, and from service flows the kind of greatness that makes others look on and say, "Here is a king." Not a king by decree of men, but a king by the appointment of heaven, enthroned by the invisible hand of the Almighty. If you would be crowned, then seek not the crown. If you would be exalted, seek not exaltation. Seek instead the lowly place, the quiet task, the unseen sacrifice. Seek the wisdom of silence, the strength of gentleness, the honor of obedience. For in these things lies the secret God has woven into the universe, the law of reversal, by which the last shall be first, the least shall be greatest, and the servant shall be king. Men will scoff at it, for it seems upside down. But in truth, it is the world that is upside down, and God's word that turns it right side up again. To walk in humility, then, is not to deny ambition, but to purify it, to cleanse it of vanity and selfishness until only the desire for God's glory remains. And when ambition is thus purified, it becomes the very path to kingship, for God will not withhold honor from those who have ceased to seek it for themselves. Think of the soil dark and lowly beneath our feet. To the casual eye, it is mere dirt, trampled underfoot, unnoticed and despised. Yet all the trees of the forest, all the fields of wheat, all the gardens of beauty, draw their strength from its hidden riches. Without the soil, there would be no harvest, no shade, no life. So it is with humility. It looks unremarkable, even pitiable, to the proud. But in its hidden depths lies the nourishment of every virtue, the root of every greatness, the foundation of every crown. Remove humility and even the loftiest gifts wither and collapse. Plant humility, and even the smallest seed becomes mighty. Therefore, when God declares, "This one method can make you a king," he speaks not of a temporary rise in fortune, not of the shifting winds of political power, but of a kingship rooted in eternity. The humble man may never wear a jeweled crown in this world, but he reigns nonetheless. Reigns in peace, reigns in wisdom, reigns in influence, reigns in the eternal recognition of heaven. And in the age to come, when all hidden things are revealed, when the masks of pride are stripped away, the crowns will be placed not upon the heads of the self-exalted, but upon those who walked in humility, those who served in silence, those who bent low in reverence. For humility is not merely a virtue among virtues. It is the golden key that unlocks the door of kingship, the hidden principle by which the Almighty lifts the lowly and seats them among princes, the method that makes a man a king. When the voice of God declares that there is a method by which a man may rise to kingship, the imagination of men quickly runs to visions of conquest, to the flash of swords, to the clamor of armies, to the strategies that bend nations beneath a single hand. But the voice of God points in a direction that few expect, for he says that authority is not carved out by domination, but shaped by service. To serve is not, as many suppose, the mark of a slave, it is the mark of one who understands the heart of true authority. For the authority that endures, the authority that does not crumble with the ages, is authority rooted not in fear but in trust, not in force but in love, not in demand but in the willingness to give. And so God has hidden a strange power in the act of service, a transforming power that takes one who bends low to lift others and sets him on high, not because he has clawed his way upward, but because others themselves begin to recognize in him the shape of a true ruler. Service seems small, yet it is the seed of greatness. A man who carries water for the thirsty, who listens to the cry of the weary, who puts his own strength at the disposal of another, may appear to be wasting himself. Yet unseen by the eyes of the proud, he is learning the weight of responsibility, he is learning the burden of care. He is learning the delicate art of shaping lives without crushing them. And when the time comes for authority to be placed upon his shoulders, he does not stumble beneath its weight, because his back has been strengthened in the long school of service. Authority without service is tyranny, but authority shaped by service becomes stewardship. It does not merely command, it blesses. It does not simply order, it nourishes. And the world, whether it admits it or not, longs for such rulers, rulers whose authority has been refined in the furnace of service. Consider how this truth has been woven into the stories of old. The one who became the leader of a people wandering in the desert was first the one who shepherded sheep in obscurity. It was in tending those silent creatures that he learned patience, vigilance, compassion, and the knowledge of guiding without driving. The one who would one day stand before Pharaoh and demand the release of captives was the same one who had stooped to aid the oppressed in secret, long before the world knew his name. His authority was not born in the courts of kings, but in the wilderness of service. Or think of the carpenter's son, whose hands were calloused by daily labor, who knelt to wash the feet of those who followed him, who touched the diseased when others recoiled, who gave his very life as the final act of service. By such service, he shaped an authority that no empire could overthrow, an authority that still rules hearts across the centuries. These are not accidents of history, but illustrations of the law God has proclaimed. That service is the forge in which true kings are made. The proud heart despises service, for it seems beneath its dignity. It says, "Why should I stoop to another? Why should I waste myself on tasks that bring me no glory?" And so it grasps for authority by shortcuts, by deceit, by violence. But the authority it gains is brittle. Those who rule without service must hold their thrones by fear, and fear is a shaky foundation. The people obey outwardly but curse inwardly. They bow with their bodies but resist with their souls. Such authority may last for a moment, but it corrodes like iron left in the rain. Service, on the other hand, builds authority from the inside out. Those who have been blessed by the servant's hands gladly give him their loyalty, not because they are forced, but because they trust. And this trust is stronger than fear, for it binds hearts together. When such a man rises, his authority is not imposed, it is welcomed. His crown is not placed upon his head by decree, it is woven by the gratitude of those he has served. Service also transforms the one who serves. A man may begin by serving reluctantly, perhaps even resentfully, as though it were a burden thrust upon him. But in the act of serving, he discovers something unexpected. He discovers that in giving of himself, he receives more than he imagined. He discovers that the very act of lifting others lifts his own soul higher. He discovers that service opens his eyes to realities he could never see from the high towers of self. He learns empathy, he learns patience, he learns wisdom. And these lessons are the substance of authority. For what is authority if not the art of guiding souls, of shaping communities, of bearing the burdens of many? And how can one guide, shape, and bear unless he has first walked the lowly road of service? Thus, the servant is being transformed, even when he does not realize it. What seemed to be the path of lowliness is in fact the training ground of kingship, the hidden workshop where God crafts rulers fit to reign. It is in service that the heart is purified from the corruption of power. Power, in its raw form, tempts the human soul toward pride, cruelty, and self-exaltation. But service tempers power like fire tempers iron. It bends it, hammers it, refines it, until what remains is not a weapon of destruction, but a tool of blessing. The man who has learned to serve does not see authority as a chance to exploit others, but as an opportunity to extend what he has already been doing on a smaller scale. His reign becomes an extension of his service, not a contradiction of it. And in this way, his authority gains a moral force that no enemy can easily undermine. He becomes a ruler not because he demands it, but because he has shown himself worthy of it through the patient labor of service. The world is full of examples that confirm this principle. In every community, even the smallest, the ones most respected are not those who boast the loudest or demand the most recognition, but those who have quietly served. The teacher who has labored faithfully for decades, the neighbor who is always ready to help in times of need, the leader who puts the welfare of his people above his own comfort. Such figures command an authority deeper than any title could grant. Their service shapes the trust of others, and trust, once earned, becomes the bedrock of leadership. It is not different in the highest spheres. The rulers who are remembered with love are those whose reigns were marked by service. The ones remembered with fear are those who ruled without it, and their memory fades like a shadow at noon, leaving only bitterness behind. Service alone shapes authority into something that endures. Yet service is not glamorous. It often takes place in silence, unseen and uncelebrated. To serve is to labor without applause, to sacrifice without recognition, to give without expectation of return. And this, too, is part of its transforming power. For in serving unseen, the heart learns to act not for the eyes of men, but for the gaze of God. It learns to be content with the invisible reward, with the quiet smile of heaven. And in that hiddenness, service gains its purity. The man who serves only when praised is still enslaved to the approval of others. The man who serves in secret, expecting nothing, is free. And this freedom, paradoxically, is the very thing that equips him for true authority. For he is not bound by the need to please. He is bound only by the call to love. Such a man is dangerous to the powers of the world, because he cannot be bought, cannot be swayed, cannot be manipulated. His authority, shaped in the hidden forge of service, is incorruptible. There is also a mystery in the way service multiplies itself. One act of service begets another, for those who are served often find themselves stirred to serve in turn. A single life of service can ignite a chain of transformations that ripple outward across generations. The humble servant becomes the seed of a movement, the fountainhead of renewal. And when authority is finally given to such a person, it magnifies not just his own influence, but the service of all those inspired by him. His kingship becomes a shared kingship, a reign not of one over many, but of many united in a common spirit of service. This is authority at its strongest, for it does not rest on a single fragile foundation, but on the living network of countless hearts joined together. Such authority cannot easily be overthrown, because it is rooted not in fear or compulsion, but in the shared commitment of those who have been transformed by service. Therefore, when God says, "This one method can make you a king," he is not promising power for the sake of vanity. He is revealing the law by which authority is shaped into something enduring and good. He is pointing to service as the path by which rulers are made, as the school in which their character is refined, as the soil in which their crowns are planted. Service does not diminish authority, it creates it. Service does not undermine strength, it gives it. Service does not keep a man small, it shapes him into a ruler. The world may mock this truth, may despise it, may call it weakness, but the world itself bears witness to it in every age. For the rulers who last, the leaders who bless, the kings who truly reign, are those whose authority has been transformed by service. When God declares that there is one method by which a man may be made into a king, he is not speaking of a secret known only to scholars or sages, nor of an art practiced by the ambitious few, but of a law eternal, as constant as the sunrise and as unshakable as the mountains. It is the law of surrender, the mysterious yielding of the soul that does not end in defeat but in triumph, that does not lead to chains but to crowns. The world trembles at the word surrender, for it associates it with weakness, with loss, with humiliation before an enemy. But the surrender of which God speaks is not the surrender to chaos, nor to tyranny, nor to chance. It is the surrender of the self to the one who made it, the laying down of pride at the feet of the eternal, the yielding of one's own will into the hands of one whose wisdom surpasses the horizons. And here lies the paradox that in surrendering, one gains, that in yielding, one conquers, that in laying down one's crown, one receives a greater crown than any hand of man could bestow. The law of surrender is not an invention of religion, nor an ornament for the devout. It is inscribed in the very grain of creation. Every river surrenders to the sea, every seed surrenders to the soil, every star surrenders to the gravity that holds it in its appointed course. Without surrender, there is only chaos, disintegration, ruin. The tree surrenders its leaves to the winter, and by that surrender is prepared for spring. The earth surrenders to the warmth of the sun, and by that surrender brings forth harvest. The body surrenders to sleep, and by that surrender is restored to strength. Surrender is not the end of life. It is the rhythm of life, the law by which all things are renewed. And if creation itself obeys this law, how much more must the soul of man yield to the one who governs all? For it is only in that surrender that we find the gates of kingship opening before us. The proud heart resists surrender. It clings to its own plans, insists on its own way, declares itself the captain of its destiny. It grasps at crowns forged by its own hand, crowns of ambition, crowns of pleasure, crowns of control. But such crowns are fragile things, liable to slip from the head and shatter upon the ground. Pride imagines itself free, but in truth it is enslaved. To anxiety, to fear, to the endless burden of maintaining its own fragile throne. Pride is a ceaseless struggle, a weary battle against the inevitable truth that man is not God. And so, the proud man exhausts himself in the pursuit of an authority he can never truly hold. But the humble man who surrenders, who says with a quiet heart, "Not my will, but thine," is freed from that futile struggle. He no longer clings, no longer resists, no longer fears. And in that surrender he finds himself lifted, crowned with a peace and an authority that no effort of pride could ever secure. There is a deep mystery in this law, a mystery that the wise have pondered and the simple have lived. The one who surrenders his desires finds them fulfilled in a higher form. The one who surrenders his rights discovers a liberty wider than the horizon. The one who surrenders his very life discovers life eternal. The world calls it folly, but heaven calls it kingship. For in surrender, the soul aligns itself with the very heart of God, and in that alignment it becomes strong, radiant, unshakable. To yield is to receive, to bow is to be lifted, to give away is to possess beyond measure. This is the eternal reversal, the upside-down law that is in truth the right side, up order of the universe. It is not merely a command, it is a description of reality, as unchanging as the pull of gravity. Those who resist it fall, those who embrace it rise. Consider how surrender has marked the path of those who became great. The patriarch, asked to lay his beloved son upon the altar, surrendered what was most precious. And in that surrender he became the father of nations, his descendants as numerous as the stars. The prophet, reluctant and trembling, surrendered his fears and returned to the land of his birth to confront a king. And in that surrender he became the liberator of an enslaved people. The young maiden, obscure and unseen, surrendered her reputation, her plans, her very body to the will of God, saying, "Be it unto me according to your word." and in that surrender she became the vessel through which salvation entered the world. Over and over, the law proves true: those who surrender become kings and queens in ways they could never have imagined. Their names remembered not for their grasping but for their yielding. Surrender is not passive. It is not the mere resignation of one too weak to fight. It is an active trust, a deliberate choice to place one's life into the hands of God. It requires more courage to surrender than to resist, more strength to yield than to cling. For surrender is the ultimate test of faith, to believe that God's plan is better than one's own, that His timing is wiser than one's urgency, that His ways, though hidden, are higher. And when a soul dares to make that surrender, it finds itself carried by a power greater than its own, a power that shapes its life into a story more profound than it could have scripted. This is why surrender opens the gates of kingship, for the surrendered soul becomes the instrument of a king whose authority is infinite. He who surrenders reigns, because he is borne along by the one who reigns over all. The law of surrender also liberates us from the tyranny of fear. Fear grips the heart that insists on control, for it knows how fragile control truly is. Fear whispers that disaster is always a breath away. That one misstep will undo everything. That one lost opportunity will never return. But the surrendered heart rests. It rests in the assurance that its life is not at the mercy of chance, but held in the hands of God. It rests in the knowledge that even loss can be transformed into gain, that even sorrow can be turned into joy. And this rest, this peace, is a form of kingship in itself. For what tyrant, what storm, what enemy can shake the soul that has surrendered all? It is already free, already victorious, already crowned. The chains that bind others cannot bind it, because it has already laid down its chains. The fears that haunt others cannot haunt it, because it has already surrendered its future into the keeping of God. This is authority of the highest kind, the authority of a soul that is unafraid. It must also be said that surrender is the doorway to wisdom. Pride blinds the eyes, making a man trust only in his own understanding, shutting him off from the guidance of heaven. But surrender opens the ears to hear, the heart to receive, the mind to be enlightened. The surrendered man is teachable, pliable, ready to be led. And because he can be led, he can also lead. Authority without wisdom is a disaster. It becomes tyranny, chaos, destruction. But authority shaped by surrender is guided by the wisdom of God Himself. Such authority does not err with arrogance, does not stumble with blindness, but walks in the light of a higher vision. The surrendered man may not always understand the path, but he trusts the guide, and that trust becomes his wisdom. And wisdom is the foundation of true kingship, for the people do not thrive under mere strength, but under the reign of one who rules with understanding. There is a final glory in surrender that cannot be overlooked. The crowns of this world fade. The thrones of this age crumble. The empires of men fall into dust. But the kingship that comes through surrender is eternal, for it is bestowed not by human decree, but by divine appointment. Those who surrender now will find themselves seated with the King of Kings in the age to come, sharing in His reign, bearing a crown that no one can take away. This is the ultimate fulfillment of the law of surrender, that those who lay down their lives will receive them back, not diminished but magnified, not temporary but everlasting. The gates of kingship opened by surrender do not close, for they are the gates of the eternal kingdom, the kingdom that cannot be shaken. To surrender here and now is to step already into that kingdom, to live even now as a king in spirit, awaiting the day when the crown will be revealed in its fullness. Therefore, when God says, "This one method can make you a king," He is pointing us to the eternal law of surrender. He is inviting us not into defeat but into victory, not into bondage but into freedom, not into loss but into a kingship that endures forever. The world will not understand. It will call surrender folly, weakness, ruin. But the heavens know better, for the heavens themselves are ordered by this law. To bow is to rise. To yield is to reign. To surrender is to enter the gates of kingship, gates that once open never close again.